What's it like to be a nurse working on the COVID floor during the first year of the pandemic? Stick around, and we'll talk about that and a whole lot more with our special guest on this episode of Here at Home. Well, welcome to the Here at Home podcast, a podcast about the people here at McGregor, their stories, their ministry, and their love for Jesus. My name is Mark Bricker, and I'm your host for the Here at Home podcast. And joining me on today's episode are Titus and Marissa Hines. So glad to have both of you on the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Happy to be here.
Are you really? No, I'm just kidding. They were clear to remind me that they did not ask to be on the podcast. And I told them very rarely does anybody ask to be on my podcast. Usually I'm the one doing all the asking, but you guys graciously agreed to come on, even though you both said this is just not your comfort zone. So I want to say that right up front, that I appreciate you being willing to get out of your comfort zone a little bit and to share just a little bit about your story. So thank you in advance for what you're doing and going to do. Now, I've known both of you for quite a while and know you pretty good, but I have a feeling folks that are listening at home might not know Titus and Marissa, or there'll be some that know you. I'm sure you'll want your parents and all the siblings to listen, but there'll be some others that don't know you so well. So let's get to know Titus and Marissa. So Titus, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and a little bit about your family growing up.
Okay. Well, I come from a large family. I'm one of 7 boys.
Oh.
Right in the middle. So
Wow.
I have 3 older, 3 younger brothers. And I grew up in Saginaw, Michigan, up where it's cold.
Yeah. How long have you been in Florida?
I'd say it's about 10 years now.
About 10 years.
2012.
Yeah, and I've had the privilege of meeting a lot of your family. But that is pretty cool. 7 boys, and I always, when I see your mom, I just say, bless her heart. She 7 boys.
Wonderful.
What about you, Marissa? Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised here, Cape Coral. Pretty much grew up in this church.
Yeah.
One brother, and yeah, I've never moved. Moved one city away.
One city away. And you went to school here too, right?
I did.
Yeah. So getting married to Titus and heading to Michigan, that was like a big trip, huh?
Big trip.
That's awesome. Tell me a little bit about your relationship with the Lord when you came to know Christ. I'll start with you this time, Marissa.
Yeah, I came to know Christ when I was 4, really young age. I think I was on my way home from Awana's, and obviously I was really, really young, but like throughout elementary, middle, high school, it's kind of a day-to-day decision to follow the Lord. And, in the different stages you grow in different ways, but
yeah, that
was when it began, when I was 4.
Yeah. And I've noticed you've always been kind of a high achiever. You were, out of high school pretty early. And how old were you when you graduated from college?
Well, when I was 17, I did 2 years of college in high school. So when I was 17, I graduated with like my AA degree. And then I was 19 when I graduated from nursing school.
Yeah. Wow. So most kids are trying to figure out what they're going to do with their life. And you're like, all right, I'm done with college. Let's start the career now. Yeah.
It was a blessing to be able to do.
Yeah, that is. Always been mature for your age. That's the word I was looking for. Titus, you not so much. No, I'm just kidding. Tell us how you came to know Christ.
Well, at an early age, I was blessed to have godly parents that taught me the truth of Scripture.
Yeah.
And I was convicted of my sin at around 6. I also went to Awana and learned Bible verses. But my mom led me to Christ when I was 6. And I was convicted of my sin and my need for Jesus.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I was 7 and realized also of my sin nature and my need for a Savior. And yes, I can remember that moment like it was yesterday. Who were some spiritual influences in your life? And it can even be people that you know personally, or maybe even authors you've read. Any people
There's too
parents?
many to count.
I know both of you have wonderful, wonderful mom and dad. I'm sure that's...
My parents were probably the biggest and continue to be the biggest.
Yeah.
But I'm a big reader, so there's a lot of authors too.
All right, well, we'll move on. So you guys have been married how long?
So just over 3 years.
Just over 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay, by the way, and I think we were talking about this just a minute ago before we started recording, you're the first married couple I've had on as guest together. I mean, I've had people that have been married, and I've had people that have been two guests, but they weren't married. So y'all are the first time I've had two people, two guests, and they're married. So that's kind of cool, right?
That's kind of cool. We're honored.
It took 30 plus episodes to do that, but so it's awesome to have you guys on here. And so been married about 3 years. How did you meet? How did all this come together?
Well, you played a small part of that, actually.
Aw.
I won't get into it. But we technically met at work. And I saw her in a picture going on your medical trip and realized who she was and that I worked with her. And that gave me the inclination to go talk with her. And so that's how we met at work.
Yeah. And it wasn't too much longer after that you were both together on our medical mission trip to Guatemala. And it seemed to really blossom on that trip. Is that kind of the way it all came together?
Yeah, that'd be accurate.
Yeah. We see you guys sitting down on the dock early in the morning, in the evening,
Yep.
just talking. Yeah.
Anytime we could, we'd get together and talk.
Yeah. That was cool. And full disclosure, I also had the honor and privilege of being the person to officiate your wedding as well. So that was really cool. All right. So you both are nurses. Why nursing, Marissa? Why did you pick that as a vocation?
Well, honestly, I was only 17, so in my mind I was thinking that I wanted to be a missionary at the time. So I was thinking either I'd be a teacher or I would be a nurse. And I had done a lot of volunteering as like an assistant teacher and kind of just decided I didn't want to do that forever, but that in nursing I'd be able to do education while caring for people and potentially take it overseas if the Lord called me to that.
Right.
So I originally went into it
Thinking
that.
you're the possibility of missions, and this would be a great tool to have and great preparation. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. What about you, Titus? Why nursing?
Well, my answer to that is multifactorial. It wasn't my first career. I was probably your age now when I decided to go into nursing. It's probably 25, 26. And so when you look at nursing, there's always been a huge need for nursing.
Yeah.
So that was part of it. The need was great, and the opportunity was great to pretty much go anywhere. Apart from that, I think it's competitive pay, and it gave me a ministry opportunity. So it was all four of those factors that I said, okay, yeah, that's definitely something to look into, and some encouragement from my parents.
Yeah. Because your dad has a little medical background.
That's right. And my mom's a nurse.
Your mom's a nurse. And got some siblings.
But I didn't grow up thinking, can't wait to be a nurse. And one day I'm going to be a nurse. No, it didn't happen that way.
But that's neat how that all came together for you and wanting to do it. So you both are nurses and relatively newlyweds and haven't been, you've been practicing nursing for a while, but not for years and years. And 2020 hits, March specifically, and we have this thing called COVID-19, and all of a sudden we find our country, our world in a pandemic, and the medical world gets turned upside down. And
That's right.
I might be sounding like I'm overstating it, but I don't think I am much.
Yeah.
Everything we thought we knew about things, all of a sudden everything seemed to be changing and constantly changing. So here you guys are. And I believe that this is correct, that y'all were on the same schedule, on the same shift, and the same floor, right?
That's right.
Which is kind of neat
Yeah.
to be married and have that same schedule, because now you're able to have your off days off and
Right.
your work days work. But COVID-19 hits, and it's quite different at that time. And I know that one of the first things I remember talking with you guys early on about that is you said, yeah, we're still working together, but the floor that we're on is now called the COVID floor. And I thought, oh my goodness. Again, I don't know a whole lot. I'm just hearing what I'm seeing on the news, and I'm thinking, poor little Titus and Marissa, they're trapped on the COVID floor. So how did that come about? Was it just, hey, we happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, or right place at the right time, however you want to look at it? But how did all that happen where your floor that you were on got that designation? What was the hospital kind of thinking? And I'll let you start, Titus.
Well, it wasn't our decision. It was our director, and she's wonderful. But basically, she got voluntold that we would be the COVID unit. And we did have a sign up. You were able to opt out. But we weren't shy from this new disease we didn't know anything about. So we said, yeah, sure, we'll do it. No problem.
A challenge. So with that designation happening on your floor, how many beds is that roughly? Personnel? What is that?
That's a good question. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. I think at the time we probably had maybe 40 beds, 40 or 50 beds at the time.
So what immediately began to change when that designation hit your floor there?
Lots. We weren't prepared for it. I don't know how else to get into it other than we can talk about airborne. So most people don't know what airborne precautions are. So before COVID hit, we had 2 airborne rooms on our unit. And what those are negative pressure rooms. So if someone has an airborne disease, like say tuberculosis, we could put them in that room. And when they open the door, air flows into the room, not out of the room. So a lot of changes happened when COVID hit because all of a sudden all of our patients were airborne. So what do? How do you create all these airborne rooms when they weren't designed for that?
You only have 2.
We only have 2. So in a lot of ways, the planning was we were not prepared for.
So you're making it up as you go along, kind of, or trying to figure things out.
Yeah. Every day it was a new, you need to do this, you need to try that,
Protocols change.
Yeah, every day. Yeah.
Wow. And that's got to be hard because you learn certain things, and now all of a sudden everything's changing quickly. So what do you do when you try to do your best? I mean, is the whole wing just kind of isolated and shut off from the rest of the hospital?
No. Yes and no. We didn't shut down the unit and make the whole unit necessarily like airborne, but we did have a policy where there was no secondary personnel or auxiliary personnel.
Right.
So the nurses were responsible for lab draws, or the nurses were responsible for the meal trays being passed. And the nurses were responsible for respiratory or whatever it was.
Or cleaning up.
Cleaning the rooms. No one was allowed in and out of the room pretty much except for the nurse.
Nurses and doctors.
Early on. Yeah. Even the doctors didn't go in the rooms.
Really?
I know that would shock people.
Yes. What?
Yeah. They would hand us a tablet and we would go in the room and they would basically do a video conference with the patient.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
So there was a lot of things early on that was just like shocking, Yeah.
Wow. Marissa, for you, what were some of the things that you were kind of thinking, feeling early on as you began serving in this particular capacity?
Well, I think my first thought when I heard of COVID, we were on our 1-year anniversary and we saw it on the TV and we're like, oh, that's weird. It's just another random thing that's not going to affect us. So I was just kind of in denial. And then we got back and our unit was the COVID unit. And we're like, oh, well, we must be going to get enough patients that we're going to be able to fill up a unit. So it must be something.
Yeah.
And I think the unit's original response was kind of a fear and like a tense feeling because everybody was nervous. Like I could get sick or I could bring it home to my family. That was a big part of it. And we wanted to help the patients, and that's why we went into nursing, was to care for patients and help patients. But it was something that we hadn't studied in nursing school, something that none of the doctors knew anything about, and it was just also new and a lot of change. So there was a lot of feelings, a lot of like unknown.
Anytime you have unknown, there usually is a little bit of fear that goes with that unknown, and I'm sure there were people that were probably more fearful than others that were working up there. And I'm glad to hear they gave you a chance to opt out.
Yeah.
Did many opt out at that point?
A few.
A few?
Yeah, probably 10%.
So not very many then, really, when you think about it.
No.
That said, hey, this is what we're called to do, and this is our opportunity to serve our community. So that's wonderful. Now, how long, and we'll come back to some more details in a minute, but how long did your floor unit stay the COVID unit, and how long did you all each stay in that capacity?
It's a good question.
Just roughly.
Yeah, I would say all of from March 2020 till the end of the year and through part of 2021.
Okay. So just about a year.
We were the COVID unit, yeah.
Yeah, just about a year. So that's a long time. Now, to do that for a few weeks or even a month or so, is going to be hard. But to do it for a year, what were some of the challenges and obstacles that you faced personally, or even as relatively newlyweds? What were some of those challenges? Titus, I'll let you go first.
Well, I touched on the Airborne. That presented some struggles in multiple ways. Someone had a great idea to create this thing that we call hood. That was attached to the bed. Basically, it was like this plastic cover that went over the bed. And the idea was it was hooked up to what sounded like a jet engine, but it was an air purifier with a HEPA filter. Okay. So when you opened the door, it was really loud. And it was supposed to run 24/7. So just going in there, talking with the patient was a struggle. They couldn't hear you. So our population is elderly, and they already have hearing problems.
And put a jet engine by their bed.
And then you put a jet engine in the room, and it's just like you can't take care of this patient because they can't hear you. You can't hear them, and that was a huge obstacle.
But somebody was trying to figure out a way to make it safer, for them and for others. And how long did the jet engines solution stay in place?
Oddly enough, it was there for probably most of that year.
Oh, wow.
So they got rid of them. But yeah, I mean, hopefully they did some good, but it was a struggle.
Yeah, well, got to try whatever you can. I mean, it's all new.
Yeah.
New stuff. What were some obstacles that you saw, either personally or as the staff that you were facing?
The biggest thing that I noticed was we got a lot more phone calls because all the families, they weren't allowed to come in.
Oh, that's right.
So our patients would be very sick and their family member is very sick, but
they couldn't go see them.
Yeah, I was the only connection between them and their family member. So we'd get a lot of phone calls, and then we would end up basically bringing the phone or bringing an iPad into the room so that they could talk to the family a lot of times.
And we kind of forget already, that wasn't that long ago, that the hospitals shut down all visitors. Mm-hmm. Nursing homes kept that for much longer for probably some good reasons why, but still how hard that was on anybody that had a loved one in the hospital or in a nursing home and they could not get to them, especially if they were pretty sick. I mean, that's hard for people. If you did not go through that, it's hard to relate what that would be like. But I knew so many people that struggled with that weren't able to see that. So what kind of ministry opportunities did that give you, Marissa? I mean, obviously you became kind of the real person that those people in the hospital, the only ones they were able to see.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of what we call therapeutic communication.
Yeah, that's a great word.
So a lot of talking to the families and trying to give them the truth of what's going on in a calm manner. letting them talk to their loved one if their loved one's able to talk.
Right.
Bringing them into the room on whatever device we had so they could talk to the family member. In the best moments, getting to pray with the patients. But one of my favorite memories was actually, and I don't remember if it was a COVID patient or if it was like in the in-between. We had just moved up to the COVID floor. But I remember this family member called and said, we haven't been able to get in contact with our dad. He's not very good at answering his phone. Could you just bring your phone in there just so we could see him? And they did. They got to see him, and they were crying, and he was crying. And I got, and they prayed with him. And it was a beautiful moment. And I got a letter a few months later thanking me and thanking the doctor that had been in charge of his care, saying that video call was the last time they saw their dad.
Oh, wow.
And it was just, I felt so honored and blessed to be able to be a part of that moment, because it was just a moment that they're never going to forget, that they got to see their dad, and he was awake enough to be able to converse with them a little bit, and it was just a sweet moment that I won't forget.
Yeah. With all the hard stuff, to have those moments like that sprinkled in.
Yeah.
Begin to make it all worthwhile. Was there ever a point where you're like, I just can't take it anymore? I mean, did that ever come across your mind?
For a lot of nurses, yeah.
There's a lot of burnout.
I think the hardest thing was the emotional side.
Yeah.
Seeing patients very, very sick, and then having nobody there by their side.
Yeah.
It's just heartbreaking. And then, sometimes we could make an exception if they were, if we knew they were not going to make it, we could make an exception to have someone come in and be with them, which was good. But yeah, the emotional side was the most troubling part.
Yeah. It's a mutual friend. I think I shared this with you a few weeks ago, that is also a nurse. And this was even past the 1 year mark in the second year of this. And I saw him here at church, and he almost started crying right there. It had been so emotionally draining, and it still was so emotionally draining. And I don't think we realize how hard it is on folks that do what you do, and really in any of the medical profession, how difficult these last few years have been. I see that in other professions as well, school teachers, how tough it's been. But I know for you, not just the emotional side, but there is even the risk, that you guys, I would see y'all on Sunday after I knew that, and I'm like, should I go over and give him a hug, or should I stay away? And I think it's safe. Yeah.
An interesting fact is that we never, got confirmed that we had COVID ever. So that's either God's protection or
he just gave you a good immune system.
Right.
We washed our hands a lot.
Right. Macy would be proud.
I'm sure she would.
she's a hand washer. All right. You gave a good example. Is there any other examples where you felt like you had that opportunity to go beyond kind of the job description to really begin to minister? You mentioned even praying with patients. Any other specific stories or examples you can think of?
I think just talking with them and kind of giving them, beyond praying, but, getting to know them on a personal level, and, sharing your life with them, so they could see your kids, they can see, your struggles, and know that, we're in this together. We feel your pain, even though we're not the ones that are sick. We understand and kind of empathize with the whole struggle.
And sometimes they just want to hear somebody talking about life and family.
They love it when you just sit there and they need someone just there.
Yeah, and to slow down enough to do that.
Yep.
Because I'm sure you're extremely busy, but to slow down. How did your own family handle the fact that you guys were doing what you were doing? Like your parents, siblings, others, were they worried or concerned or constantly calling, are you okay? Are you okay? What about you, Marissa?
The first couple months, I remember, or maybe just a month, I remember until about Easter, we all kind of quarantined because my family's pretty much all rule followers. So we're like, okay, they said quarantine, we're going to quarantine. We know that I've been in contact with COVID patients, so, I need to especially quarantine. But kind of after that, we just decided, we really need to see each other. So after that, we got together weekly and never really thought much about it. Yeah. They never seemed to. They prayed for us a lot. Mm-hmm. My mom has been so faithful. She's been sending me verses like every day that I work just to encourage me on. Mm-hmm. But I don't think they've ever deterred us from doing it. If anything, they've majorly encouraged us in what we're doing. Yeah. Which is a huge blessing.
That really is.
Yeah. My family wasn't too vocal whether they, encouraged it or not encouraged it or anything like that. But I do remember we had a family reunion in July that we all went to. And of course, our family's big. And back then it was, you weren't supposed to, especially where my parents are from in Michigan, it wasn't, you weren't supposed to gather.
Those gatherings.
Yeah. So it was like, we were gathering to protest, but really it was just a family reunion. So they're pretty relaxed. They're all medical minded. But
yeah, I think another thing too, just your demeanor. Nobody would have guessed that you were doing anything but what you normally do. You're just, all right, we're just doing what we're, supposed to be doing and called to do. And, you're somewhat under the radar anyway, but even when that, where somebody might be, you're not going to believe what I'm doing now. No, it was none of that. It was like, we had to pull it out of you to find out anything. So I think that's another reason why probably people are like, oh yeah, they must be fine. They seem fine. They look good. They're nothing unusual. And again, I said this at the beginning, but you guys are both extremely humble. And I want to say, and I know all our listeners would say the same thing, thank you for all that you do. Even if you never helped me while I was in the hospital, I know how many people you have helped, and I would want someone like either of you being the person that was tending to me or one of my family members if they were in there. And I know you guys take it very seriously, and you really do consider it a ministry. In fact, what was something that you felt God taught you during that year, that year from March 2020 to January, February of 2021? Were there any things that stood out that he was showing you, teaching you, revealing to you during that time?
Well, for me, basically a reminder that God is sovereign no matter what happens, yes, in good times or bad times. So just a daily reminder that we can trust his love despite what we're going through, what we're seeing, what we're feeling.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that
pandemic did not catch God by surprise. No. And all that we went through. Yeah, he was still in complete control of everything. Yeah, good word there, Titus. What about you, Marissa?
I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me was just how dangerous isolation is. That was, in the hospital, it was very evident. The family members that would call, the patients themselves, the staff, we were all just, it was really hard to be so isolated. And the Bible talks about, don't give up gathering, and it's very, I guess that was just a good example of what happens when you are isolated.
Yeah.
It was a good reminder to me that we need each other, especially as the body.
We were created for relationships, yeah.
Yeah, we need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is true. That was hard, for us as a church. We went, a few months without meeting, but it seemed like forever almost. Mm-hmm. And so there are some things that stand out. I don't have the greatest memory sometimes, but I won't forget that first service that when we met back in person on Sunday morning. Oh, yeah. It was, there was a little bit of, all right, will anybody show up? A little nervous in that, but the anticipation of being back together, and we had all these, protocols in place that we were doing, but you couldn't stop the energy and the excitement that we all had, because you kind of take that for granted. Even now already, we're back, we've been meeting for a long time now, but you already can easily start taking some of that for granted. Those relationships, the body of Christ, our life groups, the friendships, the people, And I hope people listening right now will be reminded again, like, oh yeah, I do. Yeah, I don't want to take this for granted what we're able to do, because who knows what'll happen in the future. And so to be able to enjoy those relationships. So good word. And good job. You guys did good.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
For not wanting to be on a podcast. The reluctant podcast guest. But y'all did wonderful. And my desire, as I told you before, that this would be an encouragement for those listening. Maybe they get a little insight into what it was like for y'all serving in that capacity. And again, how much we appreciate your service and your work and your ministry, really, to our community in that way. And we thank you so very much. Y'all both serve on the medical response team here, don't you, as well?
We do.
Yeah, and I think Pastor Wade told me you guys are looking for some folks, recruiting some folks. If anybody's listening that's medical,
come on over.
I'm sure they can call the church office and get a hold of Wade, but I'd love to have some more folks on that team. Well, thank you all so much for being a part of the podcast. We're going to go ahead and wrap up this episode of Here at Home, and thank the listeners so much for listening. We appreciate you. If you haven't yet subscribed to the Here at Home podcast, I would encourage you to do that. Give us a rating as well. You guys are subscribers, right? Huh?
We will be.
Christian, how many times do we hear that?
Quite a few.
Quite a few. We have a few that are very faithful listeners, but it takes getting them to be a guest on here to want to start listening to podcasts.
Honestly, I didn't know. I mean, it didn't surprise me that you're doing a podcast, but I didn't know about it.
Wow.
Well, now you do.
Yeah, and we have some more work to do, don't we, Christian, to get the word out? Because here's somebody that's here pretty much every Sunday. Live
that was beyond the notes. Okay. I love that one.
Yeah. That really hurts. You love that one, but don't.
I haven't listened to any yet, but I will. All 32 of them.
All 32 of them. Oh, I'm just kidding you. Hopefully, though, those that are listening will realize, hey, more people need to know about this podcast. I use the analogy with you guys that it's kind of like the old Sunday night church service where someone would get up and share their testimony, and you get to know people. Well, you get to know people on the Here at Home podcast. That's one of the reasons why we do it. All right. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll see all of you back here in a couple of weeks for another episode of Here at Home.